Greetings, fellow Earthlings. This is Dave Smith coming to you with another episode of And Another Thing with Dave on Election Night 2020, Armageddon Eve. Hopefully not, but could be. Anyway, I wanted to do a little pre-election ramble and rant and talk about a few things. Our fabulous economy, best economy ever. But what I want to play to start off here is a clip from Status Coup, published on YouTube October 31st. And this is Chris Hedges on Biden versus Trump and the coming economic Hunger Games. Oh.
And you've spoken a lot about the fact that presidential elections really aren't about anything of substance, but they're about personalities. It's interesting to me that Biden's main campaign can be boiled down to character is on the ballot, right, and a return to, corruption behind closed doors, basically. What are your thoughts? Because it's something he said during the last debate, which I didn't hear many people pick up. He said, healthcare is you have a human right to affordable healthcare. Right. You have a human right to affordable healthcare.
A human right to affordable healthcare, right? So he's appealing to progressives and Democrats with, you have a human right, but then to affordable healthcare, he's bending over to the, insurance companies, the pharmaceutical companies, the HMOs, yada, 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 right? So that is absolute professional political rhetoric, which is why you don't want somebody in political office for 30 years, right? You want to put an 8-year cap on that. So you want them to do political service, right? Like the military. You serve your country, right? And then you get the fuck out. You did your service, then you get out. Let the next person come in that's fresh and that isn't bought and paid for and corrupt as hell through and through. I mean, Biden, Pelosi, Trump. I mean, so first of all, Pelosi's not opposing Trump at all, right? Pelosi, it has what's called the power of the purse. Right? The Speaker of the House has what's called the power of the purse. Nothing gets paid for unless they sign off on it. So Pelosi signed off on $80 billion for the border wall, signed off on the border detention camps, on the immigration policy, signed off on increasing the military budget, which was already $746 billion. Russia was $51 billion, $56 billion. We're 746, so almost 700 billion more than Russia. And Nancy signed off on increasing it, 132 billion, not once, but every year in perpetuity. So in the next 10 years, just that is going to cost us $1 trillion. Just the expansion of the military. So this is obscene. I mean, we're getting to the point of, where Rome expanded its empire to the point where it caved. Like, we're getting to that point, really. $1 trillion increase in the next 10 years. We were already spending more than the next 12 countries combined on the military. So, like Ron Paul is a pretty conservative libertarian, and he says we could cut the military by half and not risk anything as far as safety goes, and he actually goes further to say that if we quit our wars of empire and conquest, then we would reduce the amount of enemies that we have, so we wouldn't need that military force. We wouldn't need those 1,000 military bases that we have abroad. But this also brings up another point, and sorry I'm rambling a little bit, but hey, this is what I do. That's why it's called And Another Thing with Dave, because I do that. I go from one thing to another thing. That is my William Shatner impersonation, as horrible as it may be. But so what? Another thing I want to talk about is entitlements. Entitlements. We can't afford it. How are we going to afford health care? You can't give people shit for free, right? Well, we're spending $132 billion more on the military next year than we're spending this year. So $132 billion. I've heard numbers, can't recall where I read this, but I've heard the number $2 billion a year would end world hunger. So if that's the fact, $2 billion would end world hunger, then how much would it cost to give everybody health care? $10 billion a year? Still a hell of a lot less than $132 billion, isn't it? Could probably even throw free education in there. I'm thinking we're probably only up to about $25 billion a year. Still got a lot of wiggle room if we take back that $132 billion military increase, right? Like, oh my God. Anyway, cheers. Driving me to drink. This is crazy. Anyway, so what I'm worried about here is violence in the streets. I hope we're not going to see it. You know, Trump actually said that if Biden wins, or if there's late votes that are counted, there might be violence. So he's almost inciting it. Anyway, let's get back to Christopher Hayes here on Status Coup.
To me, obviously, we're not breaking news.
Sorry, Chris Hedges.
On Trump and the threat that Donald Trump poses, but are people being kind of gaslit that Joe Biden himself is not a threat?
Completely. Look at Biden's record. I remember when Obama announced that he was running for president, Dennis Kucinich printed out and gave me Obama's 2-year voting record in the Senate, which was one corporate giveaway after another, which was a message to where the real centers of power in America lie. And Kucinich used this analogy. He said, when I was a kid, I used to go to baseball games in Cleveland, and ushers would go up and down and sell what they call the scorecard. He'd say, get the scorecard, get the scorecard. He said, here's the scorecard. Here's the only thing that matters. Why are the elites pumping so much money? This super PAC, which is largely funded by Wall Street and Silicon Valley, has pumped staggering amounts of money into the Biden campaign because they know that Biden has, throughout his entire political career, served the interests of the elites. And you're right. Remember, we got sold that garbage when George W. Bush ran, that he was a nice guy and the kind of guy you would want to have a beer with.
All right, so I got to inject something here, but bear with me, people, because I got to find it first. It's how I roll. I'm just a little spontaneous, but I'm going to find us a wonderful clip of Biden selling himself to big donors. Bear with me 1 second here, people. Boom, here is the clip.
Agree that your service in the Senate up to this point has not reflected any particular concern for the larger contributors.
Well, the fortunate thing is I didn't have many larger contributors, and the only reason... See, I went to the big guys for the money. I was ready to prostitute myself in the manner in which I talk about it. But what happened was they said, come back when you're 40, son. And so I had to go out. So I had to go to a number of small contributors.
Well, I think we...
He had to go to a number of small contributors. He tried to prostitute himself. This is Biden talking openly and proudly about having to prostitute himself. This video is on YouTube. It is Joe Biden. I tried to prostitute myself to big donors. So there you go. And this is on Washington Free Bacon. Posted this. Thank you, Washington Free Bacon. I'm giving you a like. So there it is from Biden's own mouth. He's a complete sellout, and they all are. Back to little Chris Hedges here.
These are just manufactured personalities. I mean, Biden himself, by the way, and I know people who know him, is phenomenally arrogant and full of himself and an intellectual lightweight and has no moral core. But you go back and look at the appalling record, which, of course, is not being discussed by the Democratic Party. This is the person who took down Anita Hill. I mean, they never talk about Biden supporting Supreme Court justices because, first of all, Biden was picked by Obama because basically it was.
Let's look at Biden's horrible and abominable record. He wrote the Patriot Act, years before it was adopted, back in the 80s. He wrote the 1994 crime bill, which led to the 3 strikes you're out, mandatory minimums for nonviolent drug sentences, started overflowing our federal prisons. And then that led to George Bush privatizing prisons. So then all of a sudden we had for-profit prisons, meaning you have an incentive to have a head in every bed. It's exactly what you don't want. An incentive to put people in jail. That's crazy. In a free country? You kidding me? I mean, I believe it's a balance of the more you invest in education, the less you have to invest in law enforcement. I believe there's a true connection there. But, that's just an intuitive gut feeling. Anyway, let's go back to more of Chris Hedges on status coup on October 31st.
As a Republican. He voted as a Republican. But this was the great champion of Clarence Thomas and Anton Scalia, 2 of the worst modern Supreme Court justices that have sat on the bench. So he rips apart Anita Hill, this courageous woman who takes on her abuser. He is one of the principal architects of the invasion of Iraq. He is a stalwart supporter of the apartheid state in Israel. He, along with the Democratic Party hierarchy, has engineered and supports the wholesale surveillance of the public by government intelligence agencies. He was behind, along with Clinton, the destruction of welfare. And under our old welfare system, 70% of the original recipients were children.
So, inexcusable. Right? They dismantled the welfare system without creating a job training program, an apprenticeship program, a high school to trades program. They didn't replace it with a pull yourself up by your bootstraps program. They just did away with it. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. This is only part 1. I'm going to come back in a little bit with a little bit more. Peace out. This has been Dave. Okay. Greetings, fellow Earthlings. This is Dave Smith with another episode of And Another Thing with Dave. And we are having another conversation with Tony Schultz on the line. Tony, how you doing?
Good, Dave. How are you?
Well, I was about to say fantastic, but I don't know. I'm filled with anxiety, and I was talking to people at the bank today. Everybody's freaking out. It looks like everybody's stocking up on stuff, and like nobody wants to go outside tomorrow. Like everybody thinks the worst is going to happen.
I sure hope that's not the case. Last thing we need is, violence in a political situation here, Dave, because isn't that what's supposed to separate us from so many other countries, is that we can change hands, the peaceful transfer of power? Without that, are we truly America without that?
Peaceful transfer of power. Thank you. And when asked point blank, Trump would not guarantee a peaceful transfer of power. He started sidestepping, and it was kind of a suspect, just like when he was asked point blank about, will you denounce white supremacist groups and hate groups? And he said, yes.
And he kind of, like, the funny thing about that was, it's like Trump jumps on people all the time. He disparages groups, individuals, institutions all the time. But when it came to white supremacists, kind of lukewarm on his denunciation of them. Really was not able to, he was not very committed in denouncing them. Let's say that.
Well, he refused to denounce them. He responded yes, and then his follow-up statement was, but somebody's got to stand up to Antifa, so stand back and stand by. He didn't say stand down. Stand down is what we were all looking for, right? Stand down, right? That's what we were looking for. What did we get? Stand by.
Well, you go back to Charlottesville, Dave, and it was very fine people on both sides. And the next day he had to clarify that. And he went through his list. I denounced them. Did I get everybody? Did I get everybody? But it was this very much, you had to force it out of him. And even with that, it was this kind of half-hearted denunciation of these groups when it just seems so like these are white supremacist groups, pal. Why can't we denounce them? These are people of quality.
There should be no mincing of words. There should be no stutter, no pause. You should denounce them like a Nazi hate group.
It seems really easy, Dave, and yet for him it just wasn't easy. And I just don't understand why, because it's like it can be kind of a wink, wink, nod, nod thing anyway. Like, are those people not going to support you? Those people are not going to vote for you? Come on.
Yeah, the hook is already sunk there, right?
Yeah, I just don't know why. I don't know why it made an issue, but one of the things that you and I talked about some years ago, Dave, and I was like, did I believe racism was over? Did I believe in institutional racism was still with us? And you and I had a back and forth about those things, and no, I totally don't believe either one of them are over. But I really did think that we weren't this bad with the situation. And Donald Trump has really brought that to the forefront.
It's only gotten worse.
We're worse than I thought. I'm strong about that.
It's only gotten worse, right?
It really has. I mean, when he comes down the escalator, Dave, and he says point blank, they're bringing crime, they're bringing drugs, they're rapists, and I suppose some of them are good people. I'm like, you can't get elected president now when you said that. That's an Archie Bunker statement. That's a scapegoating type of statement. There's just no other way around it.
At best.
I was wrong, Dave. I never thought that institutional racism was gone. I never thought that the country didn't have racism still. I never thought those things, but I really did think that we were not as bad as we seem to be. And that's not saying that all America is racist. America is not all racist, but even when you hear that kind of stuff, Dave, people will still vote for Donald Trump. He's not getting wiped out in this. I'm watching some of the returns right now, Dave, and he is behind Joe Biden right now. I think the last count was 192 for Biden, and you need 270. But Trump was over 100, and they still haven't counted Texas and Florida and Georgia, which look like they're going to fall in his camp. And Florida's got 29 electoral votes.
So you're talking electoral votes here.
So those are they've already counted California, which has 55 electoral votes. They've already counted that for Joe Biden. That's the big Democratic prize.
Yeah.
So right now it's 192 to 114 in favor of Biden.
So I feel strong about my vote for the Green Party.
Yeah.
because I knew California was going to go blue. So the crucial thing is to get enough numbers up for the Green Party so that they're viable next election, right?
Hopefully,
So
but
that they get federal funding.
I hope that's the case, Dave. But I know, we're not out of the woods here yet, and Donald Trump is not behind by very much when you consider that they haven't counted Florida and Texas yet.
Well, and we saw how it went with Bush, Tommy. So we're not out of the woods, and it ain't over till it's over. Let's just say that.
Yeah, Yogi Berra was right.
If anybody was going to pull a quick one, George Bush got away with it. So why wouldn't Trump? Right?
Yeah, well, if it comes down to it's a really close situation and it goes to the Supreme Court or something like that, Dave, well, the Republicans control that. Tie goes to Republicans. Let's put it that way.
Tony, he's actually Trump. That is actually on tape stating that the reason he's appointing and rushing the appointment of Amy Coney Barrett is because he wants the Supreme Court to decide the election.
Right. Yeah, he made that very clear.
He said it on tape.
It's not a secret, Dave.
I mean, Tony, this is unbelievable. This is like, I'm going to steal the election and this person is going to help me do it. And guess what? He just got appointed.
Yeah, that's unfortunately the way it goes, Dave. And
how is it
precedent for that? I mean, that's the scary part because it's actually not illegal.
Well, yeah, it's not illegal, and George Bush set the precedent for it in what was it, 2000? So riddle me this: how does it make any sense? Oh, I don't know. I just lost my train of thought. But so the Electoral College is clearly an organization that is designed to circumvent the popular vote, right?
Yes, it is.
And put in place to benefit Southern slave states, right? When they didn't have the voting numbers, right?
I believe that's the history of it. I'm not as familiar with that as you might be, but I've heard some of that before.
I just learned something to this effect last night, that it's only 200 years old and was put into place basically to be able to give more voting power to the southern states.
Well, as of right now, you want something strange right now. As far as the electoral college goes, Biden ahead right now. Popular vote, Trump ahead right now. Go figure that one.
Wow, but it's early.
It's still way early, Dave. In terms of a football game, to use a sports analogy, it's pretty much only halftime right now. There's still a long way to go.
I was going to give the analogy that we haven't even reached halftime exactly. So still plenty of game left. It could be anybody's call. But what we're fearing, and what I'm just parroting from multiple sources, is that Trump might declare a victory prematurely if he's showing a premature lead. So luckily there's no, way out in front premature lead.
Yeah, I just hope that, Dave, because with all the shenanigans the Republicans have been trying to use, and Trump has been very open about not counting votes after tonight. So that is illegal, Dave. That is illegal. You can't do that. But apparently they're going to try something like that.
It's absolutely ridiculous because it's been our standard practice to receive ballots 7 days after the election, right? It's not when you receive the ballot, it's when your vote was cast. You have to cast your vote before the deadline. It's got nothing to do. It's got nothing to do with counting the ballots, right?
Yeah, that was supposed to be right. As long as they're in before the end of today, when polls close today,
then they get counted.
You got to count them. If it might take a couple of days longer, who knows?
I don't care how long it takes. And we talked about this before. We got till January 1st to count them, right?
January 20th is Inauguration Day.
Okay, thank you. So we got till January.
Plenty of time.
Plenty of time.
Plenty of time. There's just no reason to rush.
And the deadline is not the important thing. The correct outcome is the important thing. Right?
You would think so, Dave, but Miller, not Stephen Miller, Jason Miller, another one of the president's guys, and I forgot what exactly his title is, but he was talking about the same thing that Trump was talking about, Dave, and that was, if you count these votes after Election Day, somehow they're ripe for fraud. And he doesn't go any farther into it than that, but why would that mean they were fraudulent just because it took longer to count them? That makes no sense at all.
There's no logic there at all. The person cast their vote. Period. Everybody's vote has to be counted. It doesn't matter how long it takes. And then, now we look back and you look at the obstruction of justice with the dismantling of postal service equipment, right? So they're trying to slow down the counting of votes, and at the same time, they're trying to slow down the receiving of votes, and at the same time, they're trying to say that all the votes need to be counted by a certain date. Nowhere does it ever say that we need to hurry up and count the votes by a certain time.
Well, Dave, I mean, we've had several elections, like 2000 that you were talking about, where election day came and went, and we didn't know who the winner was. And that we had to go find out later who was the winner. We've had this before. It's just not unusual. I mean, when you have all these votes coming in, Dave, by mail, the in-person voting, I mean, how do we know, how can we ever be sure that it's going to be done by the end of election day?
Think about all the military personnel.
That's a lot of stuff to sort out.
What about just all the military personnel?
Yes, the overseas personnel their votes have to come in. That's all by mail.
Right. We have 1,000 bases abroad. All their votes have to come in, and they should be able to be received on postmarked midnight tonight.
Right. It's unbelievably simple, Dave. Unbelievably simple.
This is rudimentary. This is elementary.
Very basic stuff. And just the fact, David, that you've seen Republicans, and it's not even close, Dave. If people try to tell you, oh, they do it too, right? If they try to use that whataboutism on you, say it's not even close in terms of who's trying to make it so fewer people vote. It's the Republicans all the time. They want fewer people to vote.
That's absolutely true. and they've gone to great lengths to do it and succeeded in a number of them. So if you're a felon, you can't vote. Did you know that?
Of course.
If you're in jail, you can't vote. So there's a measure on the ballot that I voted yes for that says, once you've done your time, you can vote again. which
I
it's
have
like
no.
it's like the flip side of that song. Don't do the crime if you can't do the time, but once you've done the time, boom, you're free, man.
Well, what's the old saying? You've paid your debt to society.
So you should be a full member of society once again, right? But these are methodical methods, methodical maneuvers by the right to disenfranchise voters, to reduce the amount of voters, because the more people that vote, the less chance the Republican Party has of winning. So you and I both know, like that leak that came from the Nixon administration, right, where his head aide on his deathbed admitted that the drug war was just to reduce the voting turnout.
John Ehrlichman.
Thank you.
Yes.
So John Ehrlichman, on his deathbed, admitted that they planted heroin in the inner cities and marijuana in the fucking suburbs, and cracked down on both of those so that they could eliminate minorities and hippies from the voter rolls, because those people tended to vote Democratic.
Yeah, that's just, and that's why, David, a big part of not letting felons vote. Disproportionately, African Americans are incarcerated. That
way disproportionately.
I mean, I'm sure that has something to do with it. It's obviously not just about punishment. It's about, well, we want to disenfranchise as many of these people that we can.
Exactly. It's more about that than punishment.
I mean, if anybody's so inclined, any of our viewers, to look up a man by the name Paul Weyrich. I've posted this on Facebook at least once, where he was a big part of the movement for ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council. Dave, he's been a big wig in Republican politics going way back, and it was in the early '70s where he was at the microphone and he was just saying, you people have the goo government, good government. You want everybody to vote. He said, quote, I don't want everybody to vote. And then he went on to say, Dave, that Republican chances are better when fewer people vote. And he was very straightforward about it. He was not mincing any words. And I was just kind of shocked when I'd seen that. And just to be that open about it, Dave. It's like, you mean you want less people to engage in our democracy?
Right.
Less people to engage.
Well, and you would think, I mean, how hard would it be to just register everybody to vote when they get their driver's license?
It seems so unbelievably simple.
But they make you register. If you move, you got to re-register. Why does it matter where you live? Like, I mean, I guess, yeah, district elections and this and that, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It should be made easier, not harder, right? So automatic registration when you get your license, and then of course, if you move, you just update your information. And voting
doesn't seem like it's that hard.
And voting should be always like it was right here under COVID. Like for every state, you should be able to register up till the day of the election and vote up till the day of the election. Right?
Right. It seems pretty simple. We want people to engage in this. And if, like right now, which is just, I just can't believe it, Dave, but Donald Trump leads the popular vote right now. I was just absolutely, after his administration has gone the way it's gone, with, and even beyond COVID, but mostly with the virus, his handling of the pandemic. And yet the majority of people, at least so far, think he deserves another 4 years. I am shocked by that, Dave. I really am shocked by that. I would not have been shocked if he wins the electoral college and wins the presidency again. That wouldn't totally shock me. But that the majority of Americans, given all that we know about this man and his presidency and the state of our nation, would want 4 more years of this guy. I'm just...
Well, let's keep in mind that vote machines can be skewed, right? Like, so in the Bush election, Bush versus Gore, it was found that, I think, what was it, like 1 out of 4 votes was flipped from Gore to Bush because of machine tampering.
Wow, that is sad.
So, don't pay attention to the popular vote. And like we were saying before, the popular vote doesn't matter anyway. So
but just as a reference, just to make a point,
right?
That really more of us want more of Donald Trump. What?
Yeah, I don't believe that.
I want a guy to move in my house who tried to burn the house down. What?
Yeah. I don't believe that. I'm hoping people are smarter than that. But, we won't know till tomorrow or 2 weeks from now, right?
Yeah, we're not really sure. It's going to take a while.
So,
we got to figure out when, somebody gets to 270, make that official. And then after that, there's, you can count all the votes, and that's great. But if somebody's been awarded 270 electoral votes, that will end it.
Then we're done. Yeah. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed, Dave. I got to tell you, I feel almost like I did last week watching the Dodgers in the World Series. I'm on pins and needles, buddy.
Well, and let's just talk about the fact that Biden's no saint either, right? Because, we don't want to slip into fascism, but let's remind everybody that's listening, in case they don't know us, we're a couple middle-aged white dudes, we don't have a party affiliation. We're not in love with personality. We're looking at policies, and we're looking at what's best for the working class person.
I would agree with that. That's what I'm after.
Fair summary, right? Yeah. So based on that, I want you to listen to this clip I got here.
Powering on.
This is Chris Hedges. You and I both love him. And here he is on the Status Coup. Do you ever listen to them? Status Coup, spelled Coop, C-O-U-P.
I'm very familiar with Chris Hedges, as you mentioned. Yeah, I'm very smart guy.
Yeah, and so this is Chris Hedges on Biden versus Trump and the coming economic Hunger Games. So check out him, Chris Hedges on Biden right here.
He is one of the principal architects of the invasion of Iraq. He is a stalwart supporter of the apartheid state in Israel. He, along with the Democratic Party hierarchy, has engineered and supports the wholesale surveillance of the public by government intelligence agencies. He was behind, along with Clinton, the destruction of welfare. And under our old welfare system, 70% of the original recipients were children. He has called repeatedly for cuts to Social Security. He was one of the architects of NAFTA, the greatest betrayal of the working class in this country since the 1947 Taft-Hartley Act. He's been behind all the free trade deals, deindustrialization, the real decline in wages, which have resulted, of course, in the loss of hundreds of thousands of good-paying manufacturing jobs, and then the lifting of tariffs so that workers in sweatshops in Mexico and China and Vietnam can produce products that are shipped back and then sold to us. He's been an enemy in the Obama administration with Arne Duncan, was a huge proponent of charter schools. It's not just Betsy DeVos. He is behind the 1994 Omnibus Crime Bill, which doubled our prison population, tripled and quadrupled sentences. Huge, which he used to brag about, by the way, huge expansion of crimes that merit the death penalty. And then, of course, the whole militarization of police. He has said he won't support the Green New Deal. He doesn't support immigration reform. He supports fracking. He's never been good in his voting record on women's right to abortion, reproductive rights. He's a segregationist, longtime opponent of busing, and had close relationships with the worst segregationists in the Congress. Student debt, and then, of course, as you mentioned, the whole for-profit, and also deregulating the banking industry with Glass-Steagall, but then the whole for-profit health system, which is the reason our pandemic is we can't control, because we don't have a health system that's built to control. It's built to make money. It doesn't stockpile vaccines or protective gear or ventilators or anything else, because you don't make money in it. What they've done is strip communities of hospitals, drastically reduce the numbers of hospital beds, ratcheted up the cost of healthcare. This is all Biden.
And, Noam Chomsky, who has been very, very strong that there's no discussion here, you should vote for Biden. And he phrases it as the traditional leftist, apparatus has been. Election day is kind of a temporary thing. You just go push a button. But the real work is not in electoral politics, but activism and pushing people like Biden left. And you've heard this from progressive groups: fight against Trump, get rid of Trump, and then let's fight like hell to move Biden. From what I've seen, Biden has told you he's not going to move throughout this campaign. Is that realistic, that Biden could be moved through progressive action, the mass mobilization we've seen from young people, in the case of Black Lives Matter, but maybe?
Yeah. So there's Chris Hedges just shredding Biden on his record, right?
And it's not good. It's not pretty. But,
not pretty at all.
What he was talking about with Noam Chomsky, Dave, is kind of where I've been for a long time, and I think you would agree with this, that got to get rid of Trump. He's just proven not to be the guy. He's proved it over and over and over again. And then hopefully we can move Joe Biden to the left, to a more progressive outlook and more progressive policies. That's a hope, Dave. I'm hoping Biden wins. I'm hoping we can move him. That's a lot of hope.
I'm hoping Biden wins, and I'm hoping that sets us up for a third party in 2024. Because I don't have any hope in a two-party system.
If that is the case, Dave, I'm just hoping. Again, here I am with the hope that there's going to be another party to rival the Republican Party on the right. Because if you get a split vote like that on the left, the Republicans are just going to come right back in and take over. And I just feel like we always lose ground,
Yeah.
As bad as the Democrats are, and as much as we want them to be different, we're always worse under Republican leadership. The last several presidents, it's very clear where we've ended up when a Republican president leaves office.
They always seem to take the ball a little further.
And this is, the nation is totally collapsed. We are in a terrible state right now. David, we are in the worst situation that we've been in since, the Depression. I mean, this is
in our lifetime.
and yes, any of you Trump supporters that are out there listening to this, and are, giving me the finger, just be honest with yourselves. Yes, the pandemic came and hurt things when things did look like they were better, but a lot of things weren't that great to begin with. And the pandemic, absolutely just took us off a cliff. And nobody's going to blame Donald Trump for the pandemic. But Dave, his response to the pandemic and his, the way he's continued to behave during this pandemic, that is his responsibility.
Well, and it almost seems like a willful ignorance in order to infect more people. And I've been saying this to you for a while, that I think the goal the entire time was to infect as many people as possible so you can declare a national emergency.
God, that just sounds so out there to me. But the way he's acted, it's hard to see it another way. I just, like, what is your point, President Trump? What is your point?
Right? I mean, he's got the best advisors in the world giving him daily briefings. So what is its willful ignorance?
Because if the original thought to this, Dave, was Trump didn't want to acknowledge what was going on because he didn't want to spook the market, didn't want the economy to tank because that was his best chance of getting reelected. But when you have something like this coming on, you can talk all you want about it's not here, it's not that big of a deal, it's just a Democratic hoax, don't worry, be happy, and all those things that he said. But a virus isn't going to pay any attention to that. And sooner or later, it's going to have its negative effects. When, if you look at it this way and you say, well, guys, this is really here, we have to deal with it, and let's deal with it the best way we can, take all the available science and try to figure this out. Dave, nobody's going to blame him if the economy starts going down because, well, we have to deal with this terrible situation that he didn't bring on himself. That's not his fault. And he's dealing with this as best he can. Doesn't that rally more people to you when a president deals with a crisis successfully or at least competently?
You would think, right? You would think. But, this is the era of alternative facts and fake news and, I mean, here we get a president saying that he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and he wouldn't lose a supporter. And
not lose any votes. And boy, he was right about that. And as it turns out, Dave, he didn't even need a strong economy to compete. Now he just won Ohio. That's a lot of electoral votes in Ohio that he just picked up. So he's moving ever so much closer. And it looks like he's going to win Pennsylvania too. And that's got 20 electoral votes.
Jesus.
So he is really closing the gap here in the Electoral College against Joe Biden.
And as you and I both know, the Electoral College is everything.
That's the name of the game, Dave. That's absolutely the name of the game.
And apparently it goes back 200 years to give slave states competitive power to be able to compete with the populations of the North. So I've called bullshit on the Electoral College for years. I think it's time we abolish this abominable system. One person, one vote. I don't care where you live. If you're an American, you get to vote, and your vote matters, but it doesn't matter any more than anybody else's.
Yeah, Dave, I don't get it. I mean, to me, it makes more sense. It's so much more straightforward. Who got the most votes? And I don't care how it goes here. Okay, I don't care how it goes the rest of this evening and into tomorrow to decide who's going to win this election. if you have the most votes, just overall, you should win.
Right. And there should be no electoral college. There should be no, super voters that can supersede the popular vote. The people voted. That should be final.
Makes sense to me. But unfortunately, it's going to take an act of Congress to change this, right?
Yep. And it's not going to happen before this election's over. So here we are.
I'm not sure if it's a super majority that you need in Congress to change this, Dave. I'm not exactly sure of that process, but obviously it's not going to change anytime soon, if at all.
If at all, and definitely not in this election cycle. So here we are, bated breath, wondering if we're on the eve of Armageddon. Does the Civil War start tomorrow? I don't know.
This is really sad, Dave. They're going state by state by state here, and they're all too early to call. But the vast majority of them here, Dave, Trump's winning them.
What are you watching?
I have MSNBC on, and they're state after state after state, and Trump's leading in all of them. Too early to call, ways to go, but Trump ahead, Trump ahead, Trump ahead. It just seems like he is going to be pulling ahead here. Joe Biden has got, I believe, 196. Well, it's around 192 to 136.
Wow, that's close.
But Texas, Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas still have not gone into anybody's column, but Trump is leading.
Wow.
And now they're bringing on James Carville has just come on, and he was on last night. Big Democratic guy, and he was saying how Trump was going to get trounced. That's what projections are, right, Dave?
That's all they are.
It's like we're watching, David. It's like we're watching pregame sports shows, right?
That's absolutely.
They're giving us their predictions, and it just, you know what, guys? Let's just play the game.
That's a fantastic analogy.
It makes for interesting conversation, Dave. You want to get to know who's who, what's what. I'm all for it. I totally understand it. But in the end, that's why they play the game.
Exactly. And nobody's going to know what the result is until the game has been played. Thank you.
Wait, Cheese?
Yep.
There you are. I thought you went out there for a minute.
No. So, it's crazy. I mean, people can talk till they're blue in the face, and a lot of people get paid to do that. So they're going to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But do you want to listen to a little bit more Chris Hedges here?
Sure.
All right, let's listen to a little more clip here, and then we'll comment.
There's chances for other mobilizations. Do you see that as kind of a false hope?
Yeah. Biden, they used to call him Senator Credit Card because he was the senator from Delaware, and throughout his career did the bidding of the MBNA, which is the largest independent credit card company in the country, which, by the way, also employed his son Hunter. We know what Biden's record is. I mean, all this PR stuff and Uncle Joe and empathy, and we're just being completely gaslit. But the problem with the left is that every 4 years it proves it stands for nothing. Either you stand with we should have walked out on the Democratic Party with NAFTA, and we didn't, and that has shredded the credibility of the left because we surrender to the Democratic Party, which in Europe the Democratic Party would be considered a far right party, and that's the problem. Nobody wants to step out. Nobody wants to confront the corporate duopoly. And let's be clear, on all of the major issues, there's no difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. What they fight over are ethical or societal issues, which are not unimportant: GBLTQ rights and a woman's right to control her own body, All of that stuff is important, but those aren't really political issues. On the major political issues, whether it's war, free trade, austerity, wholesale surveillance, there's no daylight between them. And now we have no time left, given the ecocide that is looming and the potential for billions of lives to not only be disrupted but ultimately lost. And
I want to hear your take on that, Tony. I want to hear you comment on two things. One, and I love how Chris Hedges is so eloquent. There's no daylight between them. Right? What a beautiful way to say that. But I'd like to hear you comment on that, on there being no daylight between the parties on the majority of the substantive issues. If you take the wedge issues aside. And then I'd also like to hear you comment on the fact that, neither party's talking about slowing down emissions. And here we're facing, they said we have 12 years before we're into runaway climate change. So what do you got on that?
Well, I think it goes back to so many things that we have talked about for a long time, Dave, where the corporate Democratic side, the standard Democrats against the Republicans, there's just not that much difference. The difference really lies in the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. They're the ones that understand climate change is very serious and willing to move on it. They're the ones that understand that income and power inequality are a very important policy, a very important subject in our country, and has to be addressed because, like he just said, I mean, Joe Biden, credit card companies. Well, Joe Biden's in bed with the credit card companies. Well, that's exactly the thing that we don't want. I mean, if you're a progressive, Dave, you go, no, you guys, you can't charge those kind of numbers. You can't charge that much interest, right? You can't do those kinds of things. What's her name? Katie Porter, Dave, the representative from California. She's been in front of she's been on Senate House committees and things like this, talking about this very same thing. And she has these corporate bigwigs in front of her and asking them tough questions, Dave. Those are the kind of things that your Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden don't really do. That's just not what they're about. And even though I would like them more than I like Donald Trump and most Republicans, again, as Christopher Hitchens said, there's not a whole lot of difference between that. I think there's some, Dave. Like I said, I certainly prefer that. But again, Dave, I'm hoping that Joe Biden wins, and I'm hoping we can shift him to more progressive policies.
Yeah. And what about the environmental aspect?
Well, the environmental aspect, Dave, is that progressives actually recognize that, and at least Democrats acknowledge science for that. Republicans it just doesn't matter. I mean, Donald Trump had his own he had his own group do a survey, Dave. Help me out with this, Dave. Investigation. I'm forgetting the word here. There's a word I'm looking for here, but they were looking into this. They came back to him and said, "Well, actually, no, this is real. It's really happened." And he just said, "Nah, I don't believe it." He commissioned a study.
There you go.
He commissioned a study to do an environmental situation. They came back and said, "Yeah, this is bad," and he just said, "Nope, don't believe it."
Yeah. Well,
because with Republicans, Dave, science doesn't matter.
Well, but it's on the record. but it's not even that science doesn't matter. It's just that they're lying through their teeth because they're so freaking sold out to greed. Because Exxon and Shell both published papers in the 70s. Their own research. They published papers saying that their extraction was causing irreparable irreversible climate change, and that it was probably going to reach a point where it was really an issue. So here we have Exxon saying, yeah, our industry is horribly polluting, and there's going to come a time where we're going to have to pay a piper. But then they bury all these studies and lie to us.
And continue, Dave, and this is, again, where I do see a difference between Democrats and Republicans. Because at least the Democrats acknowledge that this is actually happening. And the Democrats will come out and say, look, why is it that if we go to a Green New Deal and we try to move into the future with better, cleaner technology, why is it that somehow that means less jobs, when it clearly it doesn't mean less jobs?
Well, I don't know, but you know that the Democratic Party is not just does not have the workers, best interest in mind, right? I mean, you've heard Obama sell out. You've heard him say that he was basically a moderate Republican. You've heard him. Did you see the clip of him in Flint, Michigan?
Yes.
Drinking the water?
What was that? Yeah. There's a good reason not to vote for Democrats when you see that. No doubt about it.
Let me pull this up, because this is horrible. Right? Someone give me a glass of water. You saw that?
Mm-hmm. When he pretended to take a sip?
Yeah. Here we go. Here's the clip.
Maximum volume.
Get some water. Come on up there. Give us one. I want a glass of water. I want a glass of water.
John Malkovich?
Where do we go from here?
I want a glass of water. Like, really? Really?
I honestly didn't hear it.
Unbelievable. And then he did it again in a meeting with the media, and he actually said, I'm not pulling a stunt here. I'm actually thirsty. Like, now you just said it. You're pulling a stunt. Unbelievable.
No, I just the fact, Dave, that was going on how many years ago, and it's still not fixed.
Well, and it went on, and they buried it. They tried to, the government of Flint got busted for cover up for a year and a half.
Okay.
So they're saying that every kid in Flint, 10,000 kids, have lead poisoning. So that's phenomenal, right?
It just seems like something that, I don't know, dude, with some good infrastructure, that's fixed. I don't understand why we can't deal with the situation.
And Obama did this stunt where he went to Flint and he drank the tap water. Instead, they were hoping he was going to come and grant it a federal emergency zone so it would get federal funding. They would replace all the pipes, but nope. Still hasn't been fixed.
And I don't know why we can't seem to get an answer as to why. Like, what is the point of not fixing it?
What is the point of not fixing it? How can we give $4 billion of aid to Israel when we're not fixing a water supply in our own city? right?
And when it comes to America First, Dave, those are the kind of America First things that I agree with.
Well, I would too. And, and that's the thing is when Trump, said his inauguration speech, there was a lot of things that working class people agreed with, but he just didn't follow through on any of them. The swamp is overflowing, jobs are in decline, the economy's horrible.
Make America great again.
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly. I don't understand how. I'm just hoping we don't fall into I'm hoping we don't wake up to a civil war tomorrow, Tony.
I'm hoping not, Dave. I'm not good at making predictions, but however it goes, let's absolutely prove fraud or suppression or I don't even want to hear about it, Dave. I don't want to hear about anything unless you can actually get it into court and prove it.
Yep.
Because all these things everybody just, well, I heard, well, I think, well, you know what? That's fine. That's great chatter. That's like looking at polls, Dave.
Yeah.
That's like watching the pregame sports show. Okay, that's fine if you want to do that, but it doesn't mean
Joe
anything.
Rogan had a great comment on polls. He's like, "Who the fuck has time to answer a poll? Like, who answers polls? Idiots with nothing better to do." And he's probably right, because when was the last time you even received a poll or were asked, right? Like, who are these people that are polled?
I seem to remember, Dave, leaving the grocery store in Nevada, old Alpha Beta, and having been asked about something that
Back in the day.
like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that?
Right.
But that was the only time that I can remember, Dave. And God, Dave, I don't know if I was even out of my teens yet.
Okay.
A long, long time.
Yeah, and that could have been
never Nielsen ratings either. Who gets that?
Right. I've never voted in that. And you would think with smart TVs now they just know, right?
Well, I mean, Dave, if they can do it with your computer,
they know what you're watching.
Why couldn't they do it with your television?
Oh, it's the same thing. No, they've even Edward Snowden leaked this one that smart TVs can actually look at you. You can be spied on from your own TV.
God, that is.
Isn't that crazy? They could just log on like, okay, so I'm working for the NSA. I'm tracking down Tony Schultz because, he's a whatever, international, man of mystery. And so I'm trying to gain all the factoids I can. If I can somehow lock into your computer, and they can do that, then I can control your computer. I can turn on the camera, and same thing with your TV and your phone. So your phone can be recording you. So we might be recorded right now. Like we're recording for AnchorFM.com. And I suggest you try the Anchor FM app as well. It's a fantastic way to record your podcast. You can do it on the fly with effects, add music. But I'm sure we're being recorded by the FBI as well.
Yeah, and the FBI guys, if you're listening to us and recording us, you're really wasting your time. Because believe me, we're just guys that get up and go to work and deal with our
the
life.
Equivalent of like being a cop sitting at the donut shop.
But Dave, I mean, it's been how many years now that your computer tracks everywhere you go and sends you things that, because of an algorithm, they figured out what your likes are. So they send you more of that, right?
Yeah.
But you know, and your phone, Dave, even if I don't use my phone at a certain restaurant, I'll come home, look at my phone, and it'll say, "How did you like that restaurant?"
Yeah, would you like a coupon for Olive Garden? Like, what?
So I'm absolutely being tracked.
Oh, totally.
They know where I've been.
It's the same thing with ads on Facebook. Whatever I look at on Google, all of a sudden I start getting ads for it on Facebook.
Yeah, and it's something, Dave, I've never been totally comfortable with. I'm not uncomfortable enough to stop using these things because I live in the modern world. That's like me saying, gee, I don't like this climate change thing. I can't really deal with this. I'm not going to use my car anymore. Well, it really limits the things that I can do in my
Right.
life if I don't have a
Right.
car.
So it's not a realistic option.
It's not a realistic option.
But
And what are you not going to have you're not going to have a phone? That's crazy. I mean, any employer, Dave, now thinks that they should be able to get a hold of you anytime,
And you and I are middle-aged dudes with nothing to hide. But there is something disconcerting about the fact that everything you say might be recorded. Like,
And not only that, David, but if they wanted to use something against you and manipulate it in some form or fashion, they could do that.
That's what I'm saying, Tony. And it's disconcerting because we chop it up, right? And you could edit some of the things that we say and skew it in a whole different direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what makes me weary. And I don't think I'm paranoid. I think that's smart. I think anybody that's not thinking like that is extremely naive.
Well, I mean, the chances of it happening, Dave, are obviously very, very low. But the fact that it could happen, and it's like, wait a second, you're not my mommy. I'm a 53-year-old man. I don't break the law. I'm a good member of my community. It's like, why do you need to know where I've been?
Right.
Why do you need to know what I'm looking at when I'm online?
Yeah.
Why is that okay? I didn't sign up for that.
Exactly. I agree. I feel the same way. And if nothing else, it's a sellout to give our information to corporations so that we can then be hounded with more marketing. So,
Oh, I mean,
at the most,
they've got me figured out.
Fucking brutal headache, and it's a sellout towards the corporation. Like, what if our whole society operated for the citizen rather than the corporation? What if that would be, right? You'd have free education, you'd have free health care, you'd be able to pursue a job that you love because, well, your community would want you to be happy and a more successful individual. Instead, we're stuck in this place where we're trying to remove people from voting rolls. We're trying to make it easier to throw people in jail. One of the things on the ballot, Tony, for me, I don't know if it was for you, I forget if it was a county measure or a state measure, was to increase what is currently a misdemeanor to a felony in a few specific crimes. And I'm like, oh, hell no. Are you kidding? Why would you do that?
To make it easier to lock people up and to make more of a bureaucracy that we have to run people through the system.
Remove more people from the voting rolls.
Like, what is the, like when the ballot in Arizona, I was told recently, that make marijuana legal, to legalize pot. And I'm just thinking to myself, aren't we pretty much at that state, Dave? In this place and time now where it's like, do we really care if adults are using this?
Yeah.
Do we really want to lock people up for this? Do we really want to like run them through the legal system and all that time and cost that goes with that? Is that really
And for
necessary?
what? Right?
Even my friend Jason, Dave, the person that you and I both know, for many, many years, he was in law enforcement, and he used to be the hardcore, no gray area, crime's a crime, and if you did it, you should lock you up and throw away the key. Even years later, he finally said, yeah, I don't really care if people smoke pot. Who cares? This shouldn't be something that the law enforcement should be dealing with.
Exactly. And because any experienced law enforcement person knows that the people that are smoking pot, I'm not talking about people moving tons of it, because there's a value there and they're traffickers. But your user, they're not going to go hurt anybody. They're not a threat to anybody.
It's just absolutely
ridiculous.
It's just
it's totally ridiculous. Alcohol does way more harm to society, to people in general, health-wise, psychologically, physically, but it's on every corner.
Yeah. Literally.
Every corner. Yeah.
And that's not hyperbole.
Yeah,
it literally is.
Neighborhoods even.
Every commercial corner, it's
there. Right there. Every restaurant, it's there. Every
corner store, convenience store, gas station store, grocery store.
Everywhere you go, there's friendly good old American alcohol waving at you, right?
And remember the days you could go to like live sporting events? Remember back in, before 2020? Yeah. I don't know if people remember, Dave, but in the old days, you used to be able to go to these sporting events and you would buy a ticket and they would let you in and you could watch the game. I don't know if people remember that. It's been a long time. But at those things, David, you can get beer. You can get wine. Some of them, they have those luxury suites, Dave. You can get mixed drinks. Alcohol everywhere.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you remember back in the day where you could just tell them to come over to your section and you could order from the bleachers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My brother used to have a annual kind of playoff event with his work where he would have 200 people go, and they'd have a bunch of RVs and barbecues and everything. And he would get a huge block of seats. And it was back in that time. And he'd be like, okay, you're our beer guy.
Stay close.
Stay close. You'll be busy.
Powering off.
It was really funny. But different time, Different time.
All the good old days. Well, hopefully those are close by. I mean, no matter how the election goes, I really want to get back to, normal as much as possible, as soon as possible.
Yeah, I really miss live music.
But so right now you hear, Dave, if you want to go to the gym, you can. If you want to go to the movie, you can. And there are several restaurants now that have dine-in. Marlon and I were out at one of our favorite Italian restaurants, La Veranda, out here in Pittsburgh, not too long ago. And they all have, they're limiting capacity, to limit to how many number of people they'll allow in, which is, the obvious thing, makes sense. But, at least it's not, this complete shutdown thing. And when people continue to talk about that everything's a shutdown, I don't know what planet they're living on, Dave. I don't know, maybe their situation, their area is different, but here in Pittsburgh, California, Dave, it's getting back to normal.
Yeah, one of my own friends in down in Pacifica keeps posting stuff about we need to open up. But then he's posting pictures of himself at 14 different restaurants. It's like, I think everything's open, buddy.
Yeah. Well, it's like the gym, Dave. You can go into the gym now. When the guys at the front desk and they see that, oh well, hold on, you guys are gonna have to wait a little bit. We need a couple more people to leave. We have too many people right now, or we're at capacity right now. So it's not like in the old days where, if you went, David, at Monday or Tuesday at 5 o'clock in the evening, the place is wall to wall, right? Okay, that's the way it was. Well, now it's don't go there at those times because they can't let nearly that many people in there, and they're going to ask you to wait. You're going to have to wait outside like you're trying to get into, the grocery store, right? How they've been
Line
doing
it up.
So, and Dave, isn't that part of, being good patriotic Americans? We have bad situations we have to deal with, and we have to make sacrifices. And that's the only sacrifice they're asking us to make? Why are so many people whining about it?
Pretty minor to me, right?
It really is.
I mean, I don't know.
It's not like we shut down.
There's
in the beginning, Dave, as it turned out, we probably should have had a total shutdown earlier.
Should have. But there's all these Scots and Karens out there, Darrens and Karens, I guess, that are like, I refuse to wear a mask. I'm a free person. And they're like, dude, shut up. Like, you can do whatever you want in your house. You want to come in my store? Put on a mask. It's easy. Simple, right?
Incredibly simple to me, David.
Yeah.
Incredibly simple.
Seems non-issue.
There's another reason why when I look at Trump and the way he's handled this pandemic and the way he's politicized wearing masks and social distancing and all these kind of things, that's just another huge reason, Dave, that I just can't see for 4 more years of his presidency, because he's presented with this situation, Dave, and because of the way he's acting, so many of his followers follow suit, Dave, right? Like, somehow this is a question of our freedom. I just, that is just so overused to me. It's like, my freedom, somehow I'm taking away your freedom. I'm oppressing you by making you wear a mask during a pandemic.
You know what that reminds me of?
Airborne disease.
Reminds me of a smoker's freedom to blow smoke in your face. Right? You're encroaching on my freedom. Like, what about my fucking freedom to just breathe?
God, Dave, I've dealt with those a few times where I think I said to somebody, do you mind not smoking? And I'm like, is it okay that, I don't want to breathe your smoke? And they said to me, like, well, what about my right to smoke? Like, what about my privileges? And I'm like, yes, but my privilege to not breathe your smoke, I'm not doing anything. You don't have, what do you have to breathe my air?
Exactly.
I'm not encroaching on you in any way. You're the one who's encroaching on me. You're the one who's involved in the act itself. And now I have to breathe this foreign substance that I don't care to breathe. Yeah. It stinks.
It's a great analogy.
Yeah, I just think, Dave, somehow we've allowed the right to sort of steal the idea of what being a patriot and what freedom is, Dave. And they've really taken off and run.
Well, and I think it's really hijacked, kind of like the term conspiracy theorist, right? Because conspiracy theorist, if you break it down, that's just somebody who thinks a lot and is questioning things. That's a good thing. But it's been hijacked like the term patriot. So now some jerk off like Anacleto can think they're a patriot when in reality they're like kind of a hot-headed gun nut. an extremist, really, right?
I mean, you want to jump in the van because we have some patriot shit to do? You mean
That's
like
an
that?
extremist, right? That's like you're willing to hurt people for their belief. Like, dude, you're an extremist. You might as well be ISIS.
That's what I'm saying, Dave. I'm like, I think I responded to that like, isn't that terrorism? Or
Thank
I
you,
I forgot exactly how I
because it is.
responded to it, but I think it was something to that effect. What he calls patriotism, I'm like, yeah, that sounds like terrorism to
Yeah,
me.
exactly.
You know?
Patriotism, I think of as like a 4th of July parade, you know? Maybe a fucking couple horses, there's some flags, everybody's smiling, you can smell like a barbecue in the distance, right?
Well, but I'm thinking patriotism, Dave. Look, we've established that there's a situation going on in our country, and we have to pull together, and there's certain things that we have to do to try to get through this. To me, going along with that shows a certain amount of patriotism. Just there's certain rules that we have to follow so we can keep each other healthy.
Right. As a society, the bigger picture, right? Like, I'm willing to make certain compromises for the greater good of the greater good.
The greater good of society, David. It's like, when I drive, there's stop signs and stoplights, Dave. I have to stop
You
at them.
don't have
I don't think it's an infringement on my freedom to
You
have to do
totally
so.
don't. You
There's just
totally
these.
don't have to, Tony, but I really appreciate that you do.
It just seems like common sense to me,
Right, but
Dave.
it's that simple.
You
Like,
know?
if you're going to flex, like, imagine, right? Because that's a great analogy, right? Like, certain Trumpansies to me seem like they want to flex, like the people that are flexing their muscle on the mask. It's like you could just as easily choose a stop sign. Like, I'm an American. I'm free. I could choose whether I stop or not. Bam! Whoops.
Like Dave, like why do I could just very easily say, why do I need to have a driver's
Yeah,
license? Who
yeah,
cares? It's my
yeah.
freedom. Why do I need to get my car
You're
smog
restricting
checked?
my freedom, right?
Why do I need to pay
Yeah,
taxes?
you're encroaching on my
We
freedom.
can always we can always argue, Dave, about how much or how little that we have to pay in taxes and how many rules we should or
Sure.
shouldn't have. Now, I think that's a fair thing, but there are just going to be some because we all live in the same place. We all have to deal with each other to a certain degree and to make society
Right.
work.
Like, somebody's got to patch the frickin' potholes in the road, and it has to get paid for somehow.
Yeah, and it's actually not a bad thing because don't tell anybody though, Dave, but that's how government does create jobs. It does happen. Government does create
Don't tell
jobs,
anybody, though.
actually.
And
Yeah.
they can.
Isn't that even?
And Tony, guess what? They could do it cheaper than the private industry. Because of this thing called.
Well, and
Because of this thing, bargaining
there's
power.
another.
Like, if you buy in bulk, you know.
Well, I mean, there's another thing, David, where when I look at Republicans and I see some of their core beliefs, and I say to myself, you guys are full of shit. You guys are absolutely full of shit. Remember the whole argument that government doesn't create jobs. Well, to a certain degree,
What
they
the hell did
do.
the New Deal do? It created tens of thousands of jobs. Well, not only jobs,
I
Tony,
mean,
but
every
it.
time you see a cop or a fireman or a nurse or a a lot of doctors. I mean, isn't that part of the things that your
Well, and
teachers?
dude, so
How many
the
teachers
the
did you have
New
growing up?
Deal developed the West and the water for the West, built the Hoover Dam, which gave water to Arizona and Nevada and allowed those to thrive as communities. So
Right.
not only jobs, but whole states full of people as a result, where it was barren land before.
And didn't that help the private sector?
I think it did.
Didn't that help people make, produce grocery stores and law offices,
real estate offices, and real estate agents, and loan people, and right?
Somebody had to build houses for people to live when they were there.
Right, developer, then a carpenter has to fix them, and every time you refinance or move, you got a loan person, and then there's a realtor, and yeah.
It creates society.
Right?
Yeah. See, when Republicans seem to think, Dave, that these things don't go hand in hand, I think most progressives, Dave, really understand that they do go hand in hand. You can't really have one without the other.
I think most progressives understand that if you bring the bottom up, it helps everything. But there is no trickle down. There's no such thing as trickle down. That's, might I have some more, sir? Right? And I'm sorry, but I don't want to ask. I want to be able to make mine. I don't want to ask for it and beg for it.
I mean, I think that's the contract that we have in society. Okay, this is, you and I, when we want to go drive our cars, Dave, somebody's got to build that road. Somebody's got to build that highway.
Somebody had to change my oil today.
Yeah. And those are going to be private companies that are going to change your oil, but without a collective, Dave, without some societal cooperation, how do you get a highway built?
Yeah. Would you just rely on car manufacturers and tire manufacturers to build the highways? If so, we'd have every road would be a toll road, right?
And because those companies, if they are going to do that, if you say, let's leave it to the private sector, remember, for them, it's all about how much profit can I make? How cheap can I get labor? How cheap can I get the goods and services in order to build, what is necessary?
And that's the real conversation, is the private sector won't even get involved in the project unless there's a profit.
And I don't blame them. They're a business trying to make money.
But that's how the public sector can take over, because they don't need to make a profit.
And that's why we need
Thank you.
That's why we need it.
Like never before. Like, Tony, I believe we're sitting on the precipice of another Great Depression. Like, teetering.
My God, I sure hope not. But, Dave?
Yeah.
Dave?
Loud and clear, buddy.
Hey, you thought you went away there for a minute. Yeah, I mean, I see that we're now $32 trillion in debt. We've got this pandemic that we can't quite get through. We're in some serious trouble here, and I'm just hoping it's not going to get worse.
You know what I just read last night is China has circumvented the U.S. for production of cell phone and computer chips. So they're not going to rely on Silicon Valley anymore. They're creating their own Silicon Valley. So,
and have we been exporting a lot to them?
For everything, for iPhones, for every phone and computer, we've been exporting to them for the technology.
Wow, and they don't need us anymore. That is going to be a huge
Instead of just being the cheap labor center, now they're going to be the technology center. So there goes, Silicon Valley's going to crash because there's no way they can compete.
They're going to have to totally downsize, huh?
But I think it's just going to be, Silicon Valley's just going to turn into a ghost town. Or those people will move to China.
Oh my my
Who
God.
knows? But
Well, it just seems, David, that you can't carry this much debt without having interest rates at some point just jump up. I
and
mean,
whenever they do,
it just can't
we're
be forever.
screwed if they do.
And that's, you and I have certainly talked about this before, but that's where if we are able to move to get Biden elected and move in a progressive direction, that is one thing that has got to be big on his agenda, Dave, and it's going to be very tough given the economic climate. But we're going to have to get that debt paid down, buddy. That deficit. We got to work on the deficit day
Yeah.
one. We got to get this thing under control because if you're just you can as a an individual, you can think of how bad it can be if you're carrying too much debt.
And then you multiply that times 10 million, and then you're close. Yeah. But imagine if China called in the debt that we owe to them, we would be bankrupt.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh my God, it's so freaking scary.
So how can you operate like that and totally in the red? You can't. It's a ticking time bomb, right?
At some point, your creditors can't loan you any more money, Dave. Or if they do, it's going to be the interest rate's going to have to be a lot higher. I just don't see how you can continuously incur debt without getting it at some point realizing here's where we're going to get it paid off. And it's like a lot of bad things about Obama, but the $1.4 trillion deficit, he had it down to 500 billion. He started with 1.4, he had it down to 500. And you and I have talked many times about the Clinton situation. Hardly a perfect president, hardly a perfect person, but in this regard, he did really well. He the deficit was balanced, right?
First surplus in 100 years. We had a $77 million surplus. First thing George Bush did when he got into office was to give everybody a $300 rebate check. So he eliminated that surplus first thing in office.
Yeah, and how ridiculous was that when even though the deficit we had a surplus, we were taking in more than we were spending on a yearly basis, but we still had a national debt. It wasn't like the debt was all wiped out. It was just the deficit was in the right direction and the debt was being paid down. And wow. And yet, Dave, again, with these damn Republicans, drive me crazy. Most people in the country, Dave, still think Republicans are better on the economy than the Democrats. I just don't get that.
Yeah, well,
remember when debt and deficit spending? Remember when that was
better
a bad
on the
thing?
economy for who?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Right.
That's when the Democrat was in power. That's when it was a bad thing.
Well, better for Republicans are better for the economy, for the ruling class. Right? Because when the economy tanks, the people in the know make money on the market going down. Right?
Well, we're not going to solve it all tonight, Dave, but I'm going to have to get going here. I think
it's been a good conversation.
But I really did enjoy the
I think we beat this horse pretty well. Love you, Tony, and let's hope there's no fire in the streets tomorrow.
Yeah. Good night and
good night and good luck, and keep fighting.